welcome everybody to the Freedom Hub Working Group. I'm your host, Jeff Cantor. We're here at our LinkedIn page, and we hope you'll join us. We are available for everybody to entertain yourself and others and to learn an awful lot. You'll find us to be a very exciting place to come. My co-host today is Charles Frohman, and we are sponsored by the Freedom Hub, and you'll find that is the key place to go. Now, we are recording all these so you can register to see these and get reminders, and they're also posted on all of these sites. And don't worry about trying to write these all down, because I'll show you where we archive all these ultimately, but also be aware we do other shows, so you can subscribe, and our suggestion would be to subscribe to all of the channels, even if it's the same show, because we want to get trends and viewership on all of them, and the more subscribers the better, for sure, in that regard. And then these are the two domains, same place, either the full name or the short version of it. Let's take a quick peek over there to see what's going on. So if you get to the site, there's a lot of great stuff to look at in these drop downs, and you'll have to come back and explore. But let's just look at a couple key ones real quick. At the home screen, you'll see the hovered drop down, I should say. And the first one is about the webinars. And so this is where we're going to come back to here in a minute. This is all about the call today and what's coming up later today and future guests, as well as the links, like I indicated a minute ago, where you could see all of these. And then also we have the marketplace. And so this is where we always try to keep at the cutting edge. And so here we've got some stuff that's dealing with the issues people are being faced with COVID and other immune issues. And then even here about being able to refuse forced vaccination or mask directives. So we're definitely on the edge of everything you need to be aware of. Now, we do feature these webinars, and here's today's, and we'll come back to this, and then tonight later, and then, as I said, upcoming, and then here are these links. Well, if we go in there, there's some great archival material in here, and these go back a long time. You'll see there's some great stuff in here, and we're on all the key platforms. Here's where you can see an awful lot all at a glance. And so there's an awful lot here, as you'll notice, and they go back a long time. And sadly, a lot of this stuff, like the issues with 5G or other issues, it's as current as if they recorded it a month ago or a year ago, truthfully. And because of that, we have what's called continuing the conversation, because once the speaker is done, the topic probably is not finished, and the truth probably needs some help and wants to be furthered, or you want to become a part of it. So here's your way to connect with everybody after the event. And as a consequence, we are working with a lot of people fighting for our collective freedom. So we've got all the key advocacy issues and things to be aware of. And sadly, you need to click on every one of those. We try to keep them all cleaned to keep only the most current stuff up there. And if it's there and you haven't clicked on it yet, you better get your name on there or do something, because we're toast otherwise. And here's an ever-growing list of organizations that are helping all over the place in different ways, and this is a way to find them all at once, and then each of them can find each other. So it's a very great little circular world we've got going here. So, but let's start digging into what we're going to get excited about today, and I'm going to have Charles take over here and start to break into who is our guest today.
Thanks, Jeff, and welcome, Cheryl.
Yeah.
Cheryl Chumley is the opinion editor online version for the Washington Times, the other paper in D.C. I remember as a Republican congressional staffer in the early 90s when the Times first started coming around, and it was refreshing. It was really policy-oriented, not much pro-government propaganda. And so I've always been willing to help that paper get an audience for their good work, and they always do good work. And over the past year, as Jeff and I featured in Forbes for creating cash shopping patients, and in my other gig lobbying for the National Health Federation, we've gotten to know a lot of high-level scientists and doctors who have found that when they question any part of this COVID narrative, they get shot down, demonized, ridiculed, and more and more people are starting to wonder, is this really just about a virus, a bad cold virus? And now these lockdowns are getting worse. What's Biden going to do? And the Bill Gates meme over the past year, and more recently at the Great Reset. What is going on here? So Cheryl has an idea here that the corona hysteria might be leading to more socialism from the globalists. And so this is a larger discussion we're going to have today, and an important one, and one that so many activists want to have. We want to get deeper into the threats that face us. Cheryl is the perfect person to lead this discussion. She has a couple books: The Devil in DC, Winning Back the Country from the Beast in Washington, and Police State USA, How Orwell's Nightmare is Becoming Our Reality. A little over a decade ago, she got the Journalism Fellow Award named after Robert Novak, who many should recall from that great Crossfire program. Jeff, without further ado, here's Cheryl.
All right, fantastic, Cheryl. I'm going to give the screen over to you so you can grab it back.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
Just there you go. Okay. We're watching your screen, so go right ahead. Thank you very much.
I really don't have too much visuals, but I certainly do have some note cards with some interesting information, I hope. Thank you very much for having me. These are perilous times for America. And in my recent book, Socialists Don't Sleep, Christians Must Rise, or America Will Fall, it's not overstretching the truth. America is facing some dark times. And, the coronavirus is being used by the left as a political weapon. And I want to get into that later. But I just wanted to start by sort of outlining whether socialism, where it stands in America. And I actually became attuned to some of the socialism that was entering into America's politics and culture decades ago. It was 2003 when a Republican was in the White House, George W. Bush, and he signed into law a piece of legislation that he had actually helped craft with Democrats in Congress called the American Dream Down Payment Assistance Act. And probably few people remember that, but what it was basically a way of taking tax dollars and distributing them to minorities to encourage these minorities to buy homes, with the justification being that more minority home ownership is good for America's economy as a whole. And when Bush signed that, I thought, how is that not socialism? How is that not socialism? And from there, I became pretty much laser focused on politics and policies and agendas that had seeped into America's culture and politics, but just weren't being called socialism. And the great thing about President Donald Trump is that he has said consistently, both from the campaign trail and for his years in office, that America would never become a socialist country. But if you look beyond the tagline of socialists, you see that that's not really true. In many ways, America has become socialist, has become a softer form of socialism in some respects, but it's socialism just the same. In the end, it's un-American, it's unconstitutional, it's against freedom. And I found one of the key ways that socialism has actually crept into America's politics and society is by Democrats playing the name game. They play with the rhetoric. They deceive the public by pretending their policies and agendas aren't socialist, aren't collectivist, aren't communist, but there's something else. They're progressive. They're democratic socialists, for example. That's been the big key word in recent years. And if you remember, just a few years ago, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was at the time Democrat National Committee chair, she was asked by Chris Matthews on Hardball or MSNBC, whichever show he was hosting at the time, to explain the difference between democratic socialism and the Democratic Party. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz could not. To Chris Matthews' great credit, he kept rephrasing the question and kept pushing it. And she finally came out with something that was ridiculous. It blended what democracy was with socialism, and it came off sounding as if she ducked and dodged the question, which she did. And I found that interesting. And I found it even more interesting when shortly after that, Hillary Clinton went on the same show with the same host, Chris Matthews, and was asked the exact same question. Chris Matthews asked Hillary Clinton to tell the difference between the Democrat Party and democratic socialism. And once again, she couldn't. She came up with the same sort of wishy-washy duck and dodge of the answer. And so that is the left's way of disguising its socialism. And today, if you look at what the parties stand for, if you look at what the activist groups and nonprofits of the left stand for, they all pretty much stand for socialism. They're just not calling it that. And I took some time, and in my book, I actually researched what some of these platforms from some of these parties put forth. And I just wanted to read some of these excerpts about some of these parties that disguised their socialism by calling it something else. And this isn't new. This actually stretches back decades in America. This is how the left cleverly disguises its socialism and collectivism. The Populist Party, or the People's Party, out of Omaha, Nebraska, way back in 1892, wrote its platform as a push for what they call direct democracy. So they're calling it democracy, they're calling it democratic. And what it was their push for senators to be voted by the people and for the electors, the electoral college, to be banished. They also called for the graduated income tax. Where have we heard that before? And they pushed for government, not private ownership of things like railroads, the national transit at the time, all forms of public transportation, even the telegraph and the telephone. They wanted government to control the means of production and distribution of resources on that. So if you take the populist, agenda, and then you look at what progressives say, progressives, which is what many in the Democrat Party claim they are more like, progressives, not Democrats. And so here are some statements directly from modern day progressives in America. These are all quotes. Everyone deserves a living wage. Money should be taken out of politics. College should be free. Everyone should have health care. All immigrants should have a chance at citizenship, and families should not be broken up. Climate change is a huge threat facing our planet. And they also believe in equality for women, minorities, the LGBTQ community, breaking up big banks and so forth in order to redistribute the wealth to people they deem the winners. And so that's populism, that's progressivism. Compare that now with Democrats. The Democrat Party in 2016, its platform read this way. They wanted a basic worker income that would restore economic security for the middle class. They wanted to create what they called good paying jobs. They wanted to use government resources to fight for economic fairness and against economic inequality of all kinds. They wanted to unite Americans from all walks of life to guarantee opportunities for all. They wanted to protect individual rights and restore our democracy. They wanted to fight for climate change, to protect the environment, to push forward environmental justice policies. They wanted to guarantee affordable education for all, and they wanted to secure what they called health and safety for all. And so now we have the populists or People's Party, the progressives, the Democrat Party. And so Democrat Socialists of America, that's the big talking phrase today. The Democrat Socialists is what Democrats say that they would prefer the economy following in America. And if you look at what the DSA puts out in their platform, the DSA, it's not a political party, but it is an activist group that greatly influences both the Socialist Party in America and the Democrats. They want Medicare for all, a nationalized healthcare plan. They want the Green New Deal. They want universal rent control, a basic universal income. They want an end to mass incarceration, or what's called prison justice. And they want to have it nationwide a right for businesses to strike. And so if you look at all the parties, they're pretty much the same, no matter what they claim they're titled to. And what's worse is it's not just socialism we're talking about, it's actual communism. The Democrat Party isn't just moving to the left, it's moving far left. The Democrat Party is like the progressives, is like the socialists, and now is like the communists. If you look at what the Communist Party USA puts forth in its platform, it talks about supporting a healthcare system for all at taxpayer expense. It talks about union workers and the right to work for all across America. It talks about the end of capitalism insofar as putting it in terms of the end of oppression for workers. So it's not hyperbole. My main point is it's not hyperbole to say that the Democrat Party is pretty much the same as the Socialist Party, is pretty much the same as the Communist Party nowadays. And really, if you want to look at one party that doesn't toe that line, that far leftist line, you can look at the Republican Party. The Republican Party platform in 2016 talked about American exceptionalism. It talked about liberty and justice and individual rights. It talked about rights coming from a creator, not from government. So the main problem here with allowing socialism seeping into American society is that too few Americans are aware that the language the left uses is purposely disguised, is purposely intended to disguise their socialism. The left purposely uses soft and happy and comforting sounding phrases, so the American person, the American individual, does not realize that what they're really selling here is socialism, and even in many cases, communism. Somebody who has really perfected that language is Kamala Harris. If you paid attention to Kamala Harris on the campaign trail, her constant phrases were environmental justice, climate justice, prison justice, law enforcement justice, economic justice, racial justice, even housing justice. And what that all is doing is it sounds inviting, it sounds common sense, it sounds like something that we in America should all grab a hold of and support. After all, who doesn't want justice for all? But if you look beyond the curtain and look at how they take those words and play them out in the political world, it's all about taking from Peter to pay Paul. It's all about wealth redistribution, resource redistribution. And really, in the end, it's all about promoting that victim mentality that is so tied up with the whole socialist agenda. Socialism, in order to grow, has to create enemies out of distinct select groups of people so they can make their followers angry enough to press forward a political belief that just because somebody has more, then they must, based on some sort of government-imposed moral compass, give to those who have less. And so it's not just the big S socialism that's the problem in America. It's not just the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez types who rise to politics waving a banner of socialism and proudly declaring themselves aligned with the Socialist Party. It's actually, the bigger enemy is the small S socialism. It's the type that seeps in often unaware. People aren't aware that what they're actually supporting is socialism. And that's the type of socialism that grabs a hold of Americans' hearts and minds and turns them and flips them away from the Constitution from within. It kills the idea in Americans' minds that individualism is the way to go. And it gets them thinking down the path of thinking of others first, and not in that Christian way of thinking of others where you give charitably to those who don't have, but more as a way of looking to government to take from one to give to those less fortunate. And that's how socialism has really crept into American society and culture and politics on soft sounding, warm and fuzzy phrases that Kamala Harris and the far left have been successful at selling for some time now. And more than switching the mindset from Americans from the Constitution and towards socialism, it actually pits the Constitution as opposed to the American way of life. It doesn't just say that, we want social justice and we want equity for all. It starts to actually point to the Constitution as being a wall that prevents Americans from getting that social justice, from getting that opportunity to progress and to work and to earn and to succeed. And so this is where you get the constitutions to actually start becoming the enemy of America, which is so counter, of course, to what founding fathers envisioned. I mean, the Constitution is one of the most freedom documents ever penned. And so once that happens, it starts to lead into this cyclical societal shift in mindset, where we're conditioned to think that we as individuals can't do, and that government, because it's big government after all, big government instead must do. It's a shift from individualism to collectivism. And it doesn't just come from the political world. The real danger is when it starts shifting Americans' minds and hearts to believe that that's a truth. So you take all that's been happening, and then you add to that things like open borders, where you let in people from nations that are outright socialist, or they come from nations poverty stricken, and they come here thinking that the government has a moral obligation to provide for them. They don't come here with the idea that in America, individual rights come from God, not government, or that individual rights means that government by definition must be limited. They come here and they bring their demands for government to provide with them. So once you add in open borders to the mindset shift that's happened, and then you add in something even more harmful, the dwindling morality, the loss of a moral compass of the citizenry of America. And you remember the founding fathers' warning that a democrat republic like America is, like our government was supposed to be, cannot survive if its people aren't properly morally compassed, if its people aren't virtuous and principled. So you add all that together, and what you have is just this whirlwind of opportunity for the left to crumble America from within, to degrade our Constitution, and not just degrade it, to actually rip it and tear it from our hearts and minds, so that we don't even want it as part of our government system anymore. And now comes the even greater danger. When you look at our public school systems, you look at what is being taught our youth in our public school systems. And I've researched this quite a bit for my book. And it's not just an instinct that socialists are infiltrating our public school systems. It's an actual fact. If you go to the Democratic Socialists of America website, and I hope people do so they can check this out for themselves, you can see that the DSA has been actively recruiting members to go into the public school systems as teachers and to teach the upcoming generations in the socialist way to go. So we have a crippling that's going on of our Constitution now for the reasons I just explained. And with the DSA infiltrating the school systems and sending in teachers to train our youth in the socialist way and in the anti-capitalistic way, we have a crippling of our nation in the future. And so this is setting the stage for America's long-term demise and very difficult return to any sort of semblance of where our rights are based on individual rights at birth and not just those granted by government. So I just wanted to give a little bit more information about what the DSA has been doing in America's school systems, because every time I talk about this, people are shocked, because if you have children in the public school system, of course, you go to school functions, you interact with teachers, you have conversations and meetings with administrators, and everybody seems so nice. Everybody's friendly. Everybody loves your child. Everybody wants the best for your child. Well, that may be for the most part, but it only takes a few bad actors in positions of power and influence to change how your child is taught in the school system and the mindset and belief from which your child emerges from that school system. So for an example, in 2018, and I'm sure that you recall this, there was a widespread strike in the public school systems in West Virginia. And the media played it like this was a surge of frustrated teachers just finally had it with a school system and a government that would not meet their demands. And they presented it as if the demands were reasonable and the teachers were the victims. The unions were only looking out for the best interests of the teachers, which of course, by logical extension, they made the case that the best interest of the teachers would be the best interests of the students as well. But that's not the case. The DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, on its own website, brags about being the fuel that started that entire strike fire. And here's how they presented the strike movement that they started in their state. This is right from their website, a rundown of just how that strike went. A few DSA members that were teachers in West Virginia public schools began having conversations about new austerity measures facing public employees. Our wages had been stagnant for years, unlike our healthcare costs, which were climbing. We formed a reading group, held brainstorming sessions, and quickly agreed that winning our demands would require militant action. I mean, militant action, is that really what teachers in public school systems should be talking about? But this is the type of stuff that the DSA is pushing on a daily basis through America's public school system. That's only one small example, one small case. And I can tell you, if you do the research yourself, just go to DSA's website, you will see it's happening across America in almost all the public school systems. So the fact that these types of people are the ones teaching our children the militant way to go should be frightening, if not alarming, to free-loving American citizens, to American citizens who love freedom. So against all this comes the coronavirus, which was the focus of my talk today. I just wanted to lay out what's been going on in America. And now against all that backdrop, here comes the coronavirus. And the coronavirus brings citizens in fear. We have a media that is dying for ratings, so all too willing to drive up and ratchet that citizens' fear with real-time showcasings of deaths and case counts and bringing on guests who just heighten the hysteria of the coronavirus. And we also have a media that is actually hostile to the current administration and looking for all sorts of ways to weaponize the coronavirus to damage the White House administration. And so you have that, and you combine that with all that's been steadily taking place in America over the years, the slow seepage of socialism, the training that it's not about the individual, it's about the greater good, it's about the body, it's about the collective. And then Remember, the youth being taught that America individualism is something that needs to be pushed to the side for a globalist type of thinking. You're a citizen of the world, not a citizen of America. Individualism is old-timey America. It's all about collectivism now. And so when you look at the crackdowns that came, it's really not surprising. It's no wonder we had so many citizens for so long, and it's still ongoing, so willing to cede their individual rights on the executive order of mostly Democrat governors, on the medical bureaucratic wonk order coming from Anthony Fauci, trickling down into local health bureaucrats and local health departments, onto free market, supposedly free market businesses. And so this is where we're at in America right now. We have a conditioned youth, a conditioned older population now being brought to its knees, our knees, by fear and by an overreaching government that is taking this coronavirus and using it to best political weapon. They're using it to push as far as they can to overreach their influence and their presence in Americans' lives. You have churches that closed, you have businesses that closed, schools that closed. All three of those still closed in many parts of the nation. The states that do want to open and the states that are opened and that have numbers show that they have opened safely and continue to have declining numbers of coronavirus case counts, those states, curiously enough, are the ones that are targeted for attack, for being unsafe. So everything has sort of flipped. The science that we're supposed to rely upon in this nation as solid and truthful has been used by the left to score political points instead. And the curious thing about it is that's only creating even more fear among the American citizens. So this is where we're at. And the bigger question is, where are we headed? And I have to say, as dark and gloom and doom as all that I just presented is, what's coming is a little bit darker and a little bit gloomier. One of the, or two of the key phrases that you've probably heard about in these months of the coronavirus are the Great Reset and Build Back Better. And I just want to point out that I've researched what these phrases are. They come from the World Economic Forum, which is not a government agency. Well, it's a nonprofit, but it's comprised of private individuals. And what these phrases mean in their own words is reinvention of capitalism. That's the quote from the World Economic Forum's website. It's a reinvention of capitalism. And it's the coronavirus that is ratcheting up this reinvention of capitalism. From the World Economic Forum's own website, they want to use the coronavirus and the chaos that has been generated, not just in America, but around the world. They want to use that chaos to usher in a new form of capitalism. It's a seize the coronavirus day for the globalists and the elitists who want nothing more than bluntly to steal America's resources and steal America's sovereignty. And so this reinvention of capitalism, again, you can research it on World Economic Forum's own website, but just in brief, what the WEF has outlined is that there are three different types of capitalism. There's the shareholder type of capitalism, the kind where a company is in it to make money and to account to their shareholders. This is largely what America has, right? That's the free market. That's the capitalistic way. You make a product or provide a service, you sell a product and you sell a service. And if the buyers don't like the product or service, then you adjust accordingly. You have to be accountable to your shareholders. It's all profit driven. That's freedom. And that's the clean and pure way of doing things. The second kind that the WEF identified as a form of capitalism was one they called state capitalism. And they gave the example of China, which tells you right there that it's not capitalism at all. It's just the government government running the economy. And the third type of capitalism that WEF has identified is called the stakeholder capitalism. And this is the new reinvention that they want to bring, not just in America, but this is what they want to thrust upon the world. The stakeholder capitalism is ushering in a sort of communist type system through the corporate world. And I'm not overstating that. What it is it's basically putting businesses and companies and corporations in the position of being the social justice standards, setting social justice standards for the world. Yes, the WEF wants the companies to make a profit, but the WEF wants actually these companies to have social justice as their bigger motivation for being in business than turning a profit. So from the WEF's website is this quote, it positions private corporations as trustees of society. That is their reinvention of capitalism. That is where they want the world to go. Emerging from this coronavirus chaos, they want corporations to be in the position of being the trustees of society. I mean, these are unelected people, unaccountable people for the most part. You can't remove them in the next election. And what the WEF actually wants is these few select billionaire types of corporations to take over governments. Only they won't be in the government system. They'll be in the private market system. They'll be in the free market system, so they can't be removed. And what they will push is do-goodism. It'll be the far left agenda. It'll be the climate justice, and environmental justice. It'll be housing justice. It'll be prison reform. It'll be all these justice programs that Kamala Harris has talked about, that others on the far left have talked about for so many years, but they haven't been able to pass through Congress or pass through local government bodies. So instead, they're turning to corporations to do the dirty work of pushing and ramrodding these far left agenda items through onto the American people. And just as a quick couple examples of how that works, just think of what's happening right now with the coronavirus. You can't go into any store in America practically without having to put a face mask on, or at least without having to disobey the order in the window that says face mask required. But few laws have been passed in America requiring face masks. There certainly hasn't been anything at the federal level. There have been a couple local governments that have passed ordinances requiring face masks, but by and large, face masks are not laws. They're not lawful orders. They come from a government, or they come from a bureaucrat in the health field who suggests that these face masks should be worn. And now the businesses have taken it on themselves because they're afraid of being sued by individuals. The businesses have taken it on themselves to protect themselves from legal consequences of putting up signs that mandate face masks have to be worn. That's an example of a private company acting on behalf of the government to push forward some sort of social justice type program, some kind of social desire. Another example, look at what Jack Dorsey on Twitter does and continues to do. The censorship, which, you know, there's an argument to be made that it can't be called censorship because Jack Dorsey with Twitter is a private company. So how can he violate the First Amendment, since the First Amendment only applies to Congress and government agencies? And that, in fact, is a case I've made for some time now, that private businesses do have the right to so-called censor speech and boot off speech they deem undesirable. But this has gone beyond, and there's a whole side of the Section 230 story that can be made. My point about bringing up Jack Dorsey and Twitter, it's just an example of where the Great Reset will go and the reinvention of capitalism will go. It'll be more Jack Dorseys, more Twitter censorship everywhere on conducted by all businesses, all corporate heads, all company chiefs, because this will be the new form of capitalism that we will have to accept based on the World Economic Forum's new agenda that they're pushing. So the stakeholder capitalism is where the WEF wants to move, not just America, but the world. If you look beyond the phrases and the soft and fuzzy sounding do-goodism, what it is communism through the corporate world. And if you think that, well, that's just the WEF, that's not going to come to America, think again. One of America's most influential business lobby groups, the U.S. Business Roundtable, has embraced the Great Reset. They have embraced it and vowed to go forward with pushing this reinvented capitalism however they can. Add to that Joe Biden. Go to his campaign pages, go to his joebiden.com campaign pages, and you can see Build Back Better is part and parcel of everything that he has advocated for his incoming presidency. He wants to build back better the American workforce. He wants to build back better the opportunities for America, build back better the unions. So Joe Biden is on board with what the World Economic Forum is pushing in terms of reinvention of capitalism, which, as I said, if you look past the soft and fuzzy words, you can see that it's basically communism coming from the corporate world. So the justification for all this is the coronavirus has created chaos around the world. The economy is in uproar, and so it's up to government to come in and fix it. And so here comes the World Economic Forum. Here comes Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Here come all the government sources, government entities out there that want to save American citizens from ourselves by bringing a social justice that they say the Constitution does not provide, and that sadly our emerging youth are being trained and told the Constitution does not provide. So it's a dark and dismal presentation. My book does go into some lights at the end of the tunnel, but I can tell you, the first way to fight all this is to be aware and educated of all the different battles that the left has going right now. And it's not just about the battle for the election. There's a greater, bigger battle going on right now, and it involves globalist governments. That's the end of my remarks, and I'm willing, I'm here to answer questions.
Great, Cheryl. I'm glad that was the end of your remarks. I don't know how much further down though we could go. And the thing of it is, it's been in the works for eons. I mean, this is not like just something that happened overnight. It's just every little opportunity or stumble was something they could capture and grab a hold of. When I'm going to share one thing, because it was so funny when you made that comment, it made me remember this classic Harry Brown quip that the government knows only one thing. It knows how to break your legs, hand you a crutch, and say, "See, if it weren't for the government, you wouldn't be able to walk." And it's amazing how astute he was all way back when. But it's all about the words, and it's almost starting to sound like it's getting to be a little bit like it's time for a gulch situation. And with that little thought in mind, Freedom Fest, which is a big meeting of people that are freedom oriented, and it's been in Vegas since its inception. Well, this coming year, it's going to be in South Dakota at Mount Rushmore.
Excellent.
So, it's almost like people starting to either move, sort of, so to speak, or things are getting so rough because they're calling for that third party again. So maybe the timing is becoming right because, like you said, they're overplaying their hands so hard now. There are a lot of people going to fight back. And so where are they going to go? Look what happened with Twitter and Parler and all these other things. So things are afoot. Well, we've got some questions. Are you surprised to hear that? We've got some questions. Jonathan, and you were first up.
Cheryl, I just want to say, brilliant presentation. I happy I popped in when I did. Sad I missed the beginning of it. I love that you kind of really touched on the Constitution and really, in my opinion, I think that's what's being attacked here also. And I think the biggest problem is kind of, you're right, as people just don't understand how society works. That, you know, the Constitution is a social contract, and so I'd really love. So the World Economic Forum is kind of this. What I'm seeing is this next set of this next economic paradigm is going to basically be like evolving around them. And it's going to be kind of like behavioral economics and token economics and all that bullshit. And I think actually you're really correct on the trust companies and the trustees. I've through studying like social contracts and contract law, I just started reading the history of the Bank of New York and Trust Company. But my research brought me to that book because I was studying kind of the banking architecture and how different trust companies have been used within banking architecture. And I really like that you touched upon the trustee aspect of this new social system. I guess I don't really have any questions, more just a comment on like how you spot on everything that you're talking about fits within everything that I've been studying. And this new banking architecture that I've been studying and trying to basically place my company and whatnot inside. And I have done a really good job at that. One of my inventions is reinventing the trust company. So, but anyways, so I just want to comment on, you hit everything on the spot on. So it's a brilliant presentation. So.
Thank you so much. And thank you for educating yourself. I think that's why we're in these dark times, because too few people are educating themselves, even with all the easily accessible resources now.
But I think the biggest problem is no one knows where to look. And there's so much information out there, and it's intentionally obfuscated, right? So, I mean, the book that I'm reading is a book that was printed in 1934. So I wanted to make sure I got the correct information. You know what I mean? So, you know, the internet has definitely a way of guiding and nudging society. And another book that I stumbled upon was Nudge. And the Obama administration really used that book to attune and enacted policies that were almost direct quotations out of that book. And if you understand even more so about that, that is what China uses to enact policies also. So, I mean, this is, we are, I think, intentionally made to believe that Russia is our enemy. It's really China here, and they've been manipulating us for about 50 years. And I think a lot of information will come to the open here shortly. But yeah, that was a brilliant presentation.
Well, it's nice to hear, John. I think that, and that's what's going to require, just as until you get to that little tipping point of enough people knowing and doing. Kishore, I see you've got your hand up. Are you there? You have to unmute yourself.
Okay. So yeah, I think this whole point about deception and using misleading words to push for socialism is obviously a reality. On the other hand, I also find interesting that that minorities, for example, shifted towards Republicans because the message of socialism was something that they could understand without necessarily going into the details of what is there in the Constitution. And similarly, message of incompetence in California, for example, is working in this campaign to recall Newsom, who's so patently is totally incompetent and has been from the start, but it's now that message is getting across. So my question is, why is there hesitation to do the obvious? And, for example, a lot of immigrants articulated about their experience in socialist countries, and it resonated. And so similar things could be done to counter this deception. But once you get into the abstruse ideas of Constitution, it's like, how do you interpret it? People have different understanding of it. The basic principles are very clear, but why not pick on things that people understand to illustrate how the Constitution of the United States has been designed to prevent that?
I think you make a really good point. And actually in my book, I do make the point that I think we dicker too much over the meaning of words, right? We have arguments over what socialism is versus what socialism isn't, or as you just pointed out, what the Constitution means versus what the Constitution doesn't. And I think the better argument to make is whether it's freedom or it's not freedom, whether it's American or it's not American. And really, here's the big one, whether it's an individual right or it's a right of government, a collectivist argument. And, I didn't get into this, but I think a big player here is the media. The media has been more deceptive than the politicians in many respects and has done the dirty work and carrying of the water for many of these politicians who have been allowed to sell their soft and fuzzy sounding socialism because the media picks it up and creates enemies out of those who won't go along with it. And as for your point, Newsom in California, I don't think it was so much that people got an awareness of the constitutional rights, because I think you point that out pretty well, that maybe not as many Americans as should are attuned with the actual text and meaning of the Constitution. But what got Newsom mostly in trouble was that he was such a hypocrite. I mean, you can only be a flaming hypocrite so long before even the people who are your supporters get fed up with you. And Newsom was out there shutting everybody down from all sorts of human activity. And meanwhile, he kept being caught on video out and about without a face mask, partying with people who also didn't have face masks on indoor settings. And so I think that is a real in-your-face type of offense to freedom and individual liberties. And when people start seeing stories like that play out, that's when they get involved.
Charles, I see you got your hand up.
Thanks, Jeff. And if I might ask Jim Graypack to comment, I know he's been thinking a lot about the Great Reset as well, and how we get out of this mess and replace that fear and risk with the Great Awakening. And before Jim comments on that, Cheryl, do you have any admonitions, ideas how we can escape this horrible outcome that you've outlined? I mean, Trump winning would have helped, but I guess we've got Biden for at least 2 years, or Kamala, whatever. Do we have to go through some tribulation before things get better?
Honestly, I think so, because this didn't creep up overnight, right? I mean, there are good people out there who have been warning about this for years and years and years, and they have been mocked as conspiracy theorists or pushed to the side. That could never happen here in America. So the solution is not going to come overnight either, but some practical things people can do. Run for local office. Stop looking so much at the big parties and what parties in Washington, D.C. are doing, and look in your own backyard, because that's where it's trickling into your community. We need good people of conservative traditional values, limited government thinking on boards of supervisors, city councils, zoning boards, the architectural boards, and especially the school boards, because the school boards are in great position of just shoving propaganda into the minds of our next generation. And once our next generation is trained in this collectivist way, it's going to be very difficult to unwind.
Cheryl, I'd love to make to that point. I think we're 30 years too late to 50. This has been orchestrated for a long time, and I'm 30, And I look around at all my peers and I see exactly what you're describing. My peers are in the places of power. They make these decisions and they enact and push forth these policies. My brother's at Columbia, my other brother's at Goldman. We're 30 to 50 years too late. But there's options and there's things that we can do to move forward.
Jim?
Okay, yeah, Charles, I kind of, as soon as I heard your voice, I thought you were going to be dragging me in.
You could
Good
smell
talk. Thank you, Cheryl. You might know me from LinkedIn, or you get my email sometimes. You're probably with the other 40,000 in your list, so you don't know me. But anyway, I just sent you one too. Yeah, I've been involved in this for a long time. Same thing, 20 years or so. When I saw the writing on the wall, everything from the underground bases, pedophilia, socialism. I mean, it's a huge picture, and it's been going on for longer than we've been here. So yeah, I get it, and all I can say is, and it is stunning when you actually look and you see what's happening with these teachers unions, and one of my heroes, or I'm a fan of B.K. Eakman, where I learned, how the educational system got so corrupted and what's been going on. And that's it. My only point, I guess, to bring up is, as having a physics background, and I say this a lot, these guys probably know, there is no single future. I know it's like weird for us to think about it, but I see a really good things happening. My understanding is that our president, and who is still in office, has all of the evidence he needs to flush these people out and start making arrests. So I'm going to hold that image that a lot of these people, maybe not your brother at Goldman Sachs, but a lot of these people get, picked up, and we can get back to the Constitution, to Americanism versus collectivism, individualism, and the words of Ayn Rand and Viktor Frankl and all those great people, and have an amazing future coming. That's it.
Absolutely, I agree, and I think something that society is missing right now is the education to connect the dots between the digital future that we're heading into, really rushing into, and all the old social contracts that we have in place. And so if people don't understand that the Constitution is merely a social contract that us as Americans basically, protect, like when you join the military, you basically say your life is to protect and behold the Constitution, right? It's the social contract that we all ascribe our lives and our destinies together to. But if you tear apart that saying that it's ancient because it's a piece of paper, and and when things start moving really quickly into this digital thing where we have digital contracts and digital companies that are purely within the internet and that kind of stuff, it's going to be really hard for the people who are controlling those organizations and those different systems to get back all the way to how everything originally got there, which was through that social contract.
I agree, Jonathan. And my startup that I've been working on for quite a while is actually geared towards educating people exactly on those points, and helping get people up to speed, and helping heal this country and perhaps the world after some of these events go down in the coming weeks or months, because it's going to be hard for a lot of people.
It's interesting you're saying that, Jim, because we're getting to the end here. But Charles and I, when you've been privy to some of the conversations we've had with Dr. Mary Ruwart and her international organization. So it's really just two things going on globally. It's the socialism, communism, whatever you want to lump them into the one basket of deplorables, and the idea of individual freedom. And that's been growing because of America all over the planet. Yeah. And they're in over 180 some countries. So yeah, there's a lot of positive stuff. I mean, we're privy, even on our site, you'll see there's some stuff going to be breaking in the next couple of weeks that are going to revolutionize a lot of stuff with healthcare and other ways. So it's the grassroots going to win out in the end, because all the elites and everybody else, it's only a handful of people on the planet doing all of that stuff. Powerful, but still only
Yeah.
small in number. And
So-
so I hear what you're saying. There's some great opportunities that we can
And we
pursue.
can
Cheryl,
get
do you wanna say
Cheryl's book out
I was
to
just,
everybody.
yeah, and then I was just saying, but Cheryl, if you can kind of put a bow on it for us, we're kind of done for today.
Sure. You know what? Let's end on an optimistic note, because the reason for going all over the doom and gloom and darkness is to provide the education and the tools needed to fight it before it becomes rooted and our destiny. So there is always optimism, and you know, the spark of freedom in America just shines bright. You cannot keep Americans down, and it's the irrepressible freedom of Americans that in the end will win here.
No, that's a great way to end today. So thank you so much for being here today. That was super.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.